We haven't understood two things. We haven't understood that Islam is universal. Prophet came as a messenger to all of mankind, and he didn't come to Arabicize them. Of course, Arabic is the mother tongue of Islam. We can't pray the prayer except in Arabic. We can't say that this is the Mus'haf, the Quran, except that it's in Arabic. Everything else is the meaning in a translation, which is not Kalamullah. It's the ma'na of the Kalamullah. It's the meaning of the Word of God. Only in Arabic is it Kalamullah. No doubt at all. So there is some Arabic that is set in stone. But I'm not required to eat like an Arab. I'm not required to dress like an Arab. I'm not required to have the habits of an Arab. I'm not even required to know Arabian history, except that type of history which relates to me as a Muslim. What I am required to do is to follow this universal sunnah, some of which is the sunnah, some of which is common between all types of people, whatever part of the world you come from, and some especially related to food, dress, and day-to-day behaviour may be dictated by custom and convention. So, I have to make this. Please excuse me if I embarrass you. I don't mean to embarrass you. What this brother is wearing is a very unusual, very un-Muslim culture dress. 200 years ago, no one would be wearing this in any of the Muslim lands, except that they may have been in the service of the French or the Brits, or except because they had a hypocrisy of wanting to side with a foreign, non-Muslim culture over the Muslim culture. But for the last 50, 80 years, it's become a universal dress. And actually, providing the trousers are baggy, or if they're not baggy, then the jacket is at least maybe covering much of the thighs, that is a better dress, Islamically, than, I don't know, wearing a tight kurta with a tight shirt, which shows the shape. It's Islamic because it doesn't go against the Sharia. But it's not traditionally cultural, because we didn't know this kind of thing until much later on. So as long as we have some adab in how we wear and we're following the guidelines, that's good. But we have no, especially for those first and second generation Muslims, people like me are born here, or my children born here, this is the culture that we know. We don't know anything else. Okay. So that we don't make the sunnah particular to one time and place. That's why Imam Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah rahmatullahi alayhi, the Zad al-Ma'ad, will tell us the various dresses and colours the Prophet would wear, and sometimes he'd wear a Yemeni shawl, and sometimes he'd wear a shawl from a long draping shawl from the Damascus Syrian region, because he wanted to show that even though I have my own aada, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but as long as it fits the Islamic description. Of course, for Muslim women, there's a more stricter dress code, but still, it doesn't have to be black. Okay, it's not the sunnah to wear black. But let's not go to the other side. Let's not go to the other extreme, which is actually my customs and conventions will dictate to me all of my Islam. No. Urf and aada, they are a source of our Sharia. They are a source of our Sharia. What is the rule here? What is the qa'idah? The rule here is al-aada muhakkama. Al-aada muhakkama. Cultural norms, customs and cultures, take on the position of rulings when the Quran and the Sunnah is silent about something. That's why in Imam Malik's fiqh, in the fiqh of the people of Medina in business, I don't know how it is today in the Maliki madhab, but in the Imam Malik, he said that something which has been practiced by the Medinans, and there isn't anything to prohibit it in buying and selling, then we will continue to have it. We will continue to allow it. Because by culture we've been doing this, and there's nothing in the Quran and the Sunnah to prohibit it. So try not to practice Islam where we make it look one thing or the other without universality. it is true that, for example, if I was 20, 22, 25, and I came from one part of the Muslim world here, I might be very familiar with that type of food, that type of clothing, and find it very difficult to change. Fine. My heart is still back there. But someone who's born here, first generation, second generation, or even third generation Muslim, we have no attachment back home. What is back home? What is back home? Okay. And there was, until 1970, whatever, 74, there was no Bangladesh, Pakistan, or East and West Pakistan. It was all India. Right? So these kind of attachments, we think, and where do those original Indians come from? Either they're coming from Persia or they're coming from the Russian regions in the 14th century. We have an influx in the Indian subcontinent of Muslims coming from up north, not Delhi, north, proper north, from the Russian regions. Okay? The Turkic kind of Eastern European kind of thing. And they set most of the scholarliness in India. And before that we have just the normal influx of invasion and from that side, from the Persian side. So why don't we say that's home, or that's home? We have done, otherwise what happens is, why should a non-Muslim, let's just say they're an English man or woman, you know, Caucasian, let's say so, why should they think, oh, why should I get into this religion that is going to force me against my own natural tendencies of my habits to become an Arab or to become an Asian? And the Quran says, we sent you to as a messenger to all of the world, all of mankind. Okay? And we can't keep on saying, oh, Islam is just as much suited for Iceland and as it is for Syria or Iraq or Saudi Arabia, as it is suited to America and Mexico and Brazil. When actually, when we go there, actually, oh, I'm just making this up, I don't know if it's true. Oh, look, the Muslims in Mexico, they all speak Gujarati. And they all got, you know, they're all Indian food. And they're all wearing Indian dress. Huh? How did that ever become the universal thing? And somehow we're putting in things that actually, we've wiped away the natural, and the reason why the Prophet, isn't this the reason why the Quran comes down in different dialects? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, but there is Maliki Yawmiddin, Maliki Yawmid, and Maliki Yawmid, because a lot of that was to do with the tribal pronunciations. Okay? And that becomes Z, not Ramzan, but there is a Z reading in one of the canonical readings. Why? Because it was easy for that particular Arab tribe of processing, so that they weren't forced to read and speak Quran Qurayshi way, even though Qurayshi way became the standard. That's how far Allah went to allow cultural norms. You know, when you hear someone who's learnt tajweed and they've learnt the 10 modes of recitation, okay, 10 modes of recitation, okay, those 10 modes, if you hear them, sometimes Allah becomes Z, and sometimes the at becomes it. Doesn't change anything of the meaning at all. It's just different ways of, different sounds pronouncing that same word at the time of the Prophet. And if you ask any scholar, they'll say, yeah. But we stick with one way that we know, otherwise it becomes very confusing, obviously, I'm not saying. But what's the reason behind that? To make it easier for people who have a particular dialect not to force them to go out of their habit into something else which is unnecessary. That's how the Sunnah honours the human diversity. That's how the Sunnah honours the human. All I would say to brothers and sisters, especially for my generation downwards, first generation, second generation, is let's not wear immodest dress that has become the dominant style of dressing. if we're going to copy, if we're going to reflect Englishness, at least let's reflect that type of Englishness at a time when there was some nobility about them and some looseness in their dress, some kind of Victorian kind of stuff. That will probably be closer to the Sunnah, okay? Having a suit, but actually you find suits which are a bit longer than the normal ones. You find suits that are really short nowadays, they've gone up a bit, and you've got one or two suits that maybe the longer suit might be better. But I'm not saying this is not a fatwa, but all I'm saying is, let's copy the noblest part of the culture, not the worst part. Not the worst part. Okay? That's strange, isn't it? If I'm going to imitate as a Muslim, I think, well, I should imitate the best, but I actually imitate the worst part. Because if you look at professionalism in the non-Muslim world, normally on time, keep to their word, and then you look at sometimes the Muslim professionalism, it doesn't have some of that. But at least copy the right thing, if copying is the natural thing to do in some cases. Other than that, we aim to be inspired by the Sunnah. I say this because our problem is not just not having enough information about Islam, going through these details and knowing about Ibn Omar and knowing what this Arabic word means. That's good, and that's what we're doing. But it's also about aspiring to be what I'm meant to be. But what am I meant to be? Okay? To understand the picture on the box. To understand the picture on the box. Otherwise, the heart, wherever it can follow the Sunnah of Al-Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's what he wants to do. Sometimes he can't do it, but that's what he would like to do. That's the heart we're aspiring to have. Okay? So don't restrict the Sunnah to something. And today, anyway, the Arabs are not a qudwa anyway. If they were once upon a time a qudwa, an example to be followed, today they're certainly not an example to be followed. And this strange thing that some very ignorant Muslims have, that maybe only the Arabs have the true Islam. How's that? Name me the great scholars of hadith, how many of them were actually proper Arabs apart from Imam Malik? Bukhari was what? I mean, by the fact that if you mean Arab, because they spoke Arabic, then of course every scholar is Arabic, and that's the case. But if you're talking about from where they came and where they lived and brought up, Bukhari was what? Muslim was what? Bukhari was Bukhara, the Russian region. Muslim was Nisapur, which is next door to it. Okay? Abu Dawud was what? Sijistan, which is Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan, or one of the stans of the old Russian provinces. Ibn Majah was the same area. Tirmidhi was almost, it was near Iran. Yes, Imam Malik, Medinan. Take the well-known Imams in fiqh, Abu Hanifa, non-Arab. Imam Ahmed Baghdadi, non-Arab. Imam Shafi'i is Qurayshi, his nisbah is Qurayshi, so I'm not quite sure where he was born, but inshallah maybe Malik is Abi Medina. Scholars of Arabic language, Sibawayh, one of the greatest grammarians in classically, non-Arab. The great Arabic dictionaries that we still use to understand, nearly all non-Arab. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah in the 8th century, 7th, 8th century, he's doing a little piece on the whole Muslim world, and he's writing about major cities. He's writing about Medina and Mecca and some parts in Arabia, and he's writing about Damascus, and he's writing about Iran and what is now Iraq, and he's writing about Jerusalem and this place, and he's writing about the Muslim Spain, Andalus and Cordoba and whatever. And he's got a lot of good things to say about all of these other, but he's not got anything really good to say about the scholarship in Makkah and Medina at his time. He says they've kind of lost it, because scholarship has moved a long time ago from there to. I went to India, my parents' land, back in 2004. I mean, it's not the last time I went, but I was invited to a big conference of about 10,000 people there. And these new groups of brothers and sisters who arrived, and mashallah, in discussion, they said to me, oh, well, one of the challenges we face as Muslims in India is there's no scholar in India. Really? So the last time I was here, did they all go? Did they all leave? There's no scholar in India. No, the scholars are only in Saudi Arabia. Really? They all went in the last 2-3 years since I last came. No. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, when I was last here, there was hundreds of scholars. You have to find them now a little bit, and you have to work hard to, you know, and there are some scholars who are not really good scholars, but there are some scholars, ya Allah. Did they all leave? No. What scholars are you talking about? I'm talking about the ones that I know, and I saw, or I met, or I've heard of, and I've read, and whatever. Well, we don't know. If you don't know, then don't make such sweeping statements that there's no scholarship here, but there is. It's true that there are places in the Muslim world scholarship is lost. But what's happened is, there is now only, we're in danger of having only one type of Islam. A Saudized Islam. An Arabicized Islam. Here he is, a person from the Maghrib. By nature, let's say he can speak a bit of Arabic, or he's an Algerian, he can speak, must be a sheikh. Really? Must be. Algerians are just as ignorant as Pakistanis. The only difference is they have sweeter ignorance, because when they recite Quran, it's so nice. Even the person who is Ghabi in Deen, but when he recites Quran, most of the time it's really nice. So what I'm trying to say is, don't pin Islam onto a nation or a set of people as such. Other than the Quraysh, because the Prophet said, the Quraysh, their best traits are the best traits of all people, and their worst traits are the worst traits of all people. Okay, barring that, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The noblest of us in the sight of Allah is the one who has the most piety, not anything to do where we came from. And so, neither should we. When I was growing up, I heard this in a masjid by an Indian alim, and it put me off so much. Quran, and even if you didn't mean it rahmatullah alayhi literally, it's not a thing that you say publicly like this. Quran was revealed in Arabia, recited best by the Egyptians, practiced best by the Indians. This is Hizbiyya, this is Asabiyya, this is tribalism. No doubt at all, there are some regions and cultures within India, the Gujaratis come forward to mind, that wherever they go in the world, Allah has given them tawfiq to set up mosques and madrasas and really do Islam well. And ulama and scholarship, and especially huffaz, no doubt at all. But does that make bil jumla in general, the Indian, and my parents are Indian by the way, just, you know, I didn't mention that before. But this is his being. Recited, but what? Really? No one in this room can swear that the scholar in India, or whatever country you come from, is the greatest scholar. What we can say is, to my knowledge, in our region, this man is the scholar. But maybe my sheikh, who is the biggest sheikh in India, maybe there's a sheikh in Azhar in Egypt who is greater than him. Maybe there's a sheikh somewhere in Yemen who is greater than him. Maybe there's a sheikh somewhere in Mauritania who is greater than him. Maybe, less likely, maybe there's a sheikh somewhere in Mexico, Muslims becoming, you know, Mexicans becoming Muslims for the last 20 years, who's, but it's unlikely because it takes a long time to have that type of scholarship, but maybe, mumkin. So let's not practice Islam in a very specific way, except that we're already cultured to it, but that doesn't mean my children, okay? We need to just, so that Islam is 3-4 generations later will be part of the fabric. It's really important to be part of the fabric. There are some things we can't change. Okay? And there are things that, it's not we have to change, we just have to make sure we don't practice it in a culturally specific way. When I was at college, this young girl in college with us, she became Muslim. She accepted Islam. And we thought, oh, what to do? So we encouraged her to learn Urdu, and we brought her a shalwar qameez. The Urdu bit didn't go down well, but the shalwar qameez she wore to college. We thought, wow, mashallah, look what we've done. Okay. Urdu and shalwar qameez. Really, this is what we thought. This is, you know, this is what Islam is. Then when we have that, and we have this kind, then we look at each other, and even though birds of a feather flock together, people who come from my place, in my language, I'm more likely to, but actually there is a brotherhood. There's a real solid brotherhood. And I look at this man, and he's Habashi from Ethiopia, or he's from Mauritania, or he's from wherever, and I don't look at his colour, I just look at him as a person. And I don't go around giving stories like, Bilal, radiallahu anhu, yes, he was the first person, and he put his foot on the Kaaba, even that's how his maqam, and he gave the adhan. But wallahi, any black man come for my daughter, he could be the wali of the time, but he's black. I have this racism in me. I have this racism in me. Because I'm looking at this cultural thing, as if brown people are any better. In this country, you want to see what brown Muslims do? Brown Muslims are one of the worst type of people in this country for the image of Islam. Brown Muslims, more often than not, have shown themselves to be dirty, ghettoized, worse educated, least intellectually capable in this country. Brown Muslims in America are the other end of the scale, along with the Palestinians. It's like, what? These are the intellectuals of our time. So let's not get into brown or black. Let's just get into Islam, Tawheed, Sunnah. And that's why he, sallallahu, look at his Sahaba, subhanallah. You have, next to him, there is Abu Bakr al-Qurashi. There is Salman al-Farsi. There is Suhail al-Rumi. There is Bilal al-Habashi. And we love them all, radiyallahu anhum ajma'een. Right? The advert that used to be there in the 80s about clothes, the United Colours of Benetton. Right? For anyone who remembers, there you have it, the United Colours. And each of them had their fada'il. And of course, they had their maqams as well, and no doubt Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, but not because he's Qurayshi or his name is Abu Bakr. It's because of his iman and amal. That's what it is, not because of the colour. That's how we are. And we can't tell it as a story, my brothers. We can't tell it as a story. We must practice it in life. Otherwise, these teachings will fit in wrong hearts. And they won't, the beauty that normally comes from these teachings, it won't be apparent on us because we've missed the glue and the essence. Okay? And I'll end by not doing this. I'll finish it and I seek your forgiveness for not doing hadith, completing hadith number 3, but we'll do it next week, inshallah. This is a time when, more likely, Islamophobia will increase. That is to say, an irrational fear about Islam and Muslims, not based upon any sound, rational, evidential thing. So Muslims will be, oppressing their women because we're telling them to wear niqab, hijab and burqa, and that's a big oppression. Of course, all these young women are wearing hijab, they're all oppressed, of course they're oppressed. They must be oppressed because the non-Muslim is telling us they're oppressed, so they must be oppressed. And or that any bearded person, maybe he's got bad intentions towards this country, that we're fifth columns and we're looking to destroy it and ruin it, and it's likely to get worse than better. Be sure that it's not as bad as France. Okay, our Islamophobia here, okay, bi'idhnillah, England does things quite mildly, right, okay? So hopefully the mild Islamophobic right-wing culture that is growing, it will hopefully be a bit milder than what is on the continent, but it's growing. We can curse them, and there might be evidences in the Sharia, and we could find some hadith and some action of one Nabi or one Rasul to show this. But you and I know the Prophet ﷺ, he cursed very little, and he prayed and had mercy very lot. A great deal. On one hand, you can count in 23 years, or two, how many people he cursed. But the people who did worse than him, hardly ever. Cursing is not his way. As the Prophet said, I have not come to curse. I have not been sent to curse, I've only been sent as a mercy. I have not been sent to curse, I have only been sent as a mercy. So part of the sunnah is not, this is not it. It is also that rahmah. Ya Allah, these people have many of these people have so much khair, so much goodness in them, in terms of some good qualities they have. Ya Allah, help make the good qualities they have attach to Tawheed and Iman. Because without Tawheed and Iman, these good qualities are going to be useless in the hereafter. They will count for nothing. Until Tawheed and Iman is there. And they can have. But what are we offering them? I'll tell you what. Even though with the disastrous economic system, the economics of the time, modern Western invented economy, which is the economy of the world now, as far as most people are concerned, is still the best by far. What I'm trying to say is, if we say to them, oh yes, in Islam we have a great economic system, their thing is, well, hold on a minute, we don't even, where is this? Where is this economic system? Oh yes, 400 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, in Medina, or in Spain, we're living now. Huh? Wake up, mister. That's what they'll say. If we say, oh, we have the best political system, and we do, Islam has the best. Okay? They'll say, where is it? And we say, well, actually, everywhere else is actually the democracy, right? So it's not really. Oh, but we say, oh, yes, 1,000 years ago, 1,400 years ago, but that was then, what about now? Oh, in Islam, you know, Islam gave rights to women. And da-da-da-da, and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, but that was then. They'll say, but what are you doing for women now? What are you doing for women now? Right. So, in one sense, at the moment, because of our own fault, not because of Islam's fault, because of our own fault, we can't give shining examples except historical ones. And people tend not to just value historical examples, they want to see living examples. What we can, though, give is something that they don't have. We have a spirituality, a suluk, a tazkiyah, a tasawwuf, that is livable, practicable, and you can see, and the materialist mind, the dunya-minded person, he or she can feel the benefits and see the benefits of this. But you know what? The very thing that our society needs now, along with Tawheed, of course, is the very thing of Islam we don't even give them. In a materialistic age, you'd think that the healing is spirituality, is the inward, the batin, the inward dimension of Islam, the inner dimension of Islam. And that's normally the way to counteract an excessive outwardness. An inwardness is what is needed. That inward tradition is what should be given, but we're still talking about some outward things. And that's because most of us don't even know the people that we live with. So with that being said, 10 to 9, let me give you an idea of inward. Because remember what we were going to cover, it was the 5 pillars of Islam. We've covered the 5 pillars in general. And I said we'll look at the inner dimensions of each. Did we spend some time on the prayer last week? Or did we, no, I had a long, okay. So let me go through, because it's 10 to 9, it's good. I didn't realise it was a bit early than I thought. Let's go through some of the 5, or some of the 4, because we leave the Shahada. I'm going to start off with Tahara, purification, because before you can pray, you have to purify yourself through the process of wudu, ablution. So Tahara is a condition for the acceptability of prayer. Imam al-Ghazali says in the Ihya al-Ulumuddin, and it's translated 20-25 years ago, that part of Ihya, this is not the whole of Ihya al-Ulumuddin, but one small section of it, where he talked about the inward dimensions of prayer, of zakat, of fasting, of pilgrimage, okay, the inward dimensions, the Kitab al-Ibadat, okay, the book of worship, it's been translated, okay, so it's really a good translation, it's worth getting, inshallah. So in this book he says, Tahara, purification, is of 4 levels. Okay, remember we're talking about the outward pillars of Islam, but how do we internalize, make spiritual the outward pillars, according to the Quran and the Sunnah. So he says, the outward, so Tahara has 4 degrees. He said the first degree, which is an obligation, he said it's Tahara from the najasat, It's being purified from all impurities like urine, excrement, according to the majority opinion, blood and pus, and things like that. Those things which we call najas, impure, such as the things that I've described now, and which I mentioned in our books of fiqh, there is an obligation that our bodies and our clothes, and when it comes time for prayer, the place of prayer, is free from these najasat, is an obligation. Which is why one of the adat, etiquettes that we don't follow in this society, is the toilet manners. Whatever noble qualities this country has had, I can't remember it ever having, even in Victorian times, even in its great toilet manners. I'll only refer to the men, if there are sisters there, but I'm going to try to be a bit general, okay? Even if it's permissible to stand up to answer the call of nature or urinate, even if it's permissible, the toilets and the urinals, modern ones, out of the ceramics that they're made of, it is almost impossible to stand up with one's, clothes, however they're on, and answer the call of nature without flickers sprinkling back onto your clothes. It's almost impossible to do that standing up, because of the material that toilets are made of, the ceramics. And the Prophet said, one of the major causes of adhab al-qabr, punishment of the grave, is a person didn't guard himself against urine splashes or cleaning himself after urination. So it's on his clothes somewhere. This is not an opinion. This is a fact that that's what happens. Even though it is permissible to stand up and urinate, but they say with the condition that the sprinkles don't come back at you and that the private part isn't exposed. Now the sunnah is very hard to follow in this country. I mean, unless you're at home, of course. I'm talking about publicly. Because he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wouldn't walk a few hundred. If he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was here, say, or we were in his land, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, would do what human beings do, okay? He, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wouldn't just go around the corner. He, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, would walk 3/4 to a mile and a half to answer the call of nature, out of sight from anyone